everyone. My name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about the work Resistance to Civil Government, written by Henry David Thoreau. Now, before I go into the summary and explanation of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and/or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, this work is going to go underneath my thinking and philosophy folder, just because I think that this work by Thoreau really resides within the realm of philosophy and thinking. It really shaped the world as we know it. It's a very central part of American literature. It's known as a classic of American literature. And it's very important for people such as Martin Luther King and Gandhi. Without this work, the revolutions that Gandhi and Martin Luther King led would not have been what they were. The reason why I'm saying this, one of the central ideas within Resistance to Civil Government by Thoreau is that we should protest our government when it's not doing its job right. Within this work, Thoreau says that government or the system of government that the world often portrays is like a machine. And when the machine's not working properly, a cog within the machine needs to create friction in order to disrupt the machine. And what Thoreau does is within this work, he refuses to pay taxes. And the reason why he does this, he doesn't believe in slavery. The fact that the American government was partaking in slavery, and also the American government was indulging in war with Mexico, were two things that Thoreau didn't believe were good things. So, resistance to civil obedience is really about looking at a government or your government when it's unjust, when it's doing something that's corrupt, when it's doing something that is not at the best interest of the people. Um, Thoreau is saying that we need to stand up and be our own selves. What's very important about this work is that Thoreau is trying to say we cannot be just cogs within the machine. We have to be our own person. We have to stand up and think for ourselves so that when we look at the government, we can't look at government as a perfect entity. We can't look at government as something that always has the right answers. We need to look at government as something that is going to make mistake, as something that is more than ready to make mistakes. And Thoreau, he protests this. He says that we cannot be like a lawyer, a police officer, a judge. We can't just be cogs in the machine that just do what we are trained to do. The reason why is, a lawyer goes through school, a police officer goes through school, a doctor goes through school to perform specific tasks, and they have to exist in specific parameters. And Thoreau is saying that we are human beings. We need to learn how to think for ourselves without those parameters and to escape from those parameters and be your own person. Because if your job, if your status, if those things dictate what your decisions are, if your government dictates what you do and think, you're not a individual anymore. You're literally just a cog in the machine, and you're there to be turned whatever direction the machine decides to turn you in. And so, in resistance to civil government, what we see is that Thoreau, he gets arrested. Of course, he spends some night in prison, and within this prison, he writes resistance to civil government, or you can call it civil disobedience. And what civil disobedience basically means is that you are deliberately going against your government to prove a political point or to stand against something. And you know, Thoreau really protests this because he's really just trying to say that we can't just give the government all the power to do whatever it wants, or the president or the prime minister, whoever the main central leader of your country is. You can't just sit back and give them all the power that you possess, and you can't wait until the next election to do something about it. You have to act now, because if you don't, the machine will just keep going forward and doing whatever it wants to do. So this is why this work is a classic, because it inspired people like Gandhi. It also inspired MLK, Martin Luther King. The reason why a big part of resistance to civil government is resisting civil government or civil disobedience without violence. So some people, when there's an injustice, the way that they choose to act is by taking guns or taking arms and attacking and fighting. And Thoreau is saying that that's not really the best way to do this. And Martin Luther King, within his revolution, he says this also. There's the famous line where Martin Luther King says, "An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind." And pretty much what that means is that when we take up arms, when we try to kill each other to maybe protect or defend a certain viewpoint that we have or a certain side that we have, we are not really doing anything. Violence never brings about change. Violence just brings about more violence. What Martin Luther King got from this work by Thoreau is that they should they should partake or bring about revolution through peaceful protest. And this was very successful because it worked. The thought of Martin Luther King was to protest and to fight for civil rights while letting police officers, while letting people of the military, while letting people of higher power beat black people. And pictures were being taken, videos were being taken. These horrific events of police officers shooting black people with water cannons and hurting them and you know with nightsticks and hitting them and all these types of horrific events. When these things, when situations such as these hit the newspapers, it really gives the masses a depiction of horror that most people were not going to stand behind. And this is why this work by Thoreau comes into play, because when you're resisting or when you're in the thought process of civil disobedience, you do not want to act through violence. You just want to act through the idea that you're going to change something, through the idea of thought, through the idea of actions without throwing punches. And that's what MLK did. And the pictures, the videos, and the horrific events that took place during the civil rights movement of police officers attacking black people, it really touched the hearts of the masses of the population of America, which led to civil rights. And the same thing happened with Gandhi. Gandhi took a course of nonviolence, which led to the same thing for his people, which led for the freedom of his people. So, really, Thoreau's work, Resistance to Civil Government, really it has a lot of ripples. It has a lot of people, a lot of prominent figures taking it and making it their own, and finding a way to change government without taking up arms, without, arming and taking out guns and firing, which is very powerful. Because through the idea of thought, through the idea of putting something into action without fighting someone, the world pretty much changed. And that's what's very important about Thoreau's work. So it's important not to be just a cog in the machine. It's important not to just, if you have a job, and here's another interesting part about this work by Thoreau. When Thoreau was in the woods, he came in. This is where he got arrested. When the police officer or the sheriff, whatever you want to call that person of higher figure or of higher power, Thoreau gave him the option. Said, "You have more choices than to just arrest me and to bring me to jail. You could resign your job. You can quit your job." And later, Gandhi uses this in court, and pretty much saying that we are not just cogs in the machine. We are human beings. We should be our own self. We should be able to think for ourselves. If you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, and your job tells you to do this, you shouldn't just do it because your job says so or because someone of higher power says so. You are a human being. You can think for yourself, right? You have to think through your own morals. Is this right? And that's what Thoreau is suggesting here. He didn't believe in slavery. He didn't believe um, in the Mexican in the war that America was having with Mexico, right? And so what he did is he didn't pay his taxes. He protested against that through his own way, without violence. And so him, through his own identity, he kept it by not just being a cog in the machine, and doing what the government asked him to do as a citizen to just support the country in a time of war, right? And another important part is that Thoreau said you can't just, you know, say stay silent when you lose an election, right? It's generally people think that when you have an election, let's say the majority won the election, and the other side that was not for the particular candidate that was running is just supposed to fall in line. They're always saying that's not how it's supposed to be. If you believe that a political leader is not right or is not the right fit to lead your country, you need to put certain things in action or certain stance in action. And now Thoreau is not saying you shouldn't pay your taxes, but he's saying that you shouldn't be silent, you shouldn't stay silent, you need to fight for what you believe in, depending to your own identity, depending to your own conscience and cause. And that's when you become something totally independent of the machine, right? Governments are a machine. They can be used for good, they can be used for evil. Injustice and justice is something that's interchangeable within government. It's something depending of who's in power, can fluctuate. And so that really is the central idea, the central focus of this work by Thoreau is that we need to be in the mindset of civil disobedience when we believe that our government, that our leaders are not acting right, and that they're not doing the best interest for the country or for the people. And so we shouldn't be silent. We should, in accordance to our own conscience and in accordance to our own identities, we should fight for what we believe in without violence. And as we can see through the trials of history, through Gandhi, through MLK, that standing up for what you believe in, even though when your government is not with you, um, does bring about results. Because Martin Luther King, um, when he was standing up for civil rights, you know, most of America was against him, but he kept on going without violence, and civil rights is a thing now. Same thing happened with Gandhi. So Thoreau's thinking, Thoreau's work, resistance um, to civil government, in many ways has echoes still to this day. And that's a central figure, and it's a very important essay. It's a classic, um, it's an American classic, and it's being used to this day to bring about change without violence. And that's my summary. That's my reflection of this work by Thoreau. I will be doing more explanations and more analysis of Thoreau's work. I think that he has a lot to bring to the table in terms of thinking, in terms of philosophy, in terms of how the individual should exist and express his or herself. So that's it for today. Again, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in my next video.